Welcome to Canning with Colette, pressure canning, 10-step process. Before we begin, just as a reminder, the pressure canning method must be used when canning low acid foods. As you learned in a prior class, low acid foods fall on the pH acidity chart at 4.6 and above. They are typically things like your vegetables, green beans, corn, carrots, your meats, chicken, beef, fish, legumes, navy beans, black beans, etc. So let's get into it. Step 1. Read your canner's manual. To be clear, this will be a basic presentation on how to pressure can food. However, please read the manual for your specific canner, as every pressure canner is not made the same and may have some slight differences in procedures. Make sure your pressure canner is cleaned and working properly before preparing to can. Clean lid gaskets and other parts according to the manufacturer's directions. Make sure all vent pipes are clear and contain no trapped material or mineral deposits. In general, do not use on an outdoor LP gas burner or gas range burner over 12,000 BTUs. Check your manufacturer's directions for more information about appropriate burners. Step number 2, prepare the canner. Center the canner over the burner. The burner and range must be level. Your pressure canner can be damaged if the burner puts out too much heat. Put the rack and hot water into the canner. Refer to your canner's manual for specific amount of water to add. If the amount of water is not specified, use enough water so it is 2 to 3 inches high in the canner. This is usually 3 to 4 quarts. Longer processes require more water. Some specific products, for example, smoked fish or navy beans, require that you start with even more water in the canner. Always follow the directions with USDA processes for specific foods if they require more water to be added to the canner. For hot packed foods, you can bring the water to 180 degrees Fahrenheit ahead of time, but be careful not to boil the water or heat it long enough for the depth to decrease, meaning the water starts to evaporate. For raw packed foods, the water should only be brought to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Step number 3, prepare your jars. This includes washing and sterilizing your jars, checking for nicks, cracks, or sharp edges. Also, check lids and bands for any dents or rust. Refer to the video entitled Wash and Sterilize Jars for a reminder on how to do this. As mentioned in the presentation entitled Washing and Sterilizing Jars, the NCHFP no longer requires sterilizing jars for recipes that will be processed in a water bath canner longer than 10 minutes. And it also does not require sterilizing jars for foods that will be pressure canned. Therefore, if you choose to just wash your jars, that is your choice. Step number 4, prep your food. Be sure to use clean, fresh, firm food to provide the best nutritional value and overall taste. And if you are going to be preparing something like, potatoes, be sure to cut them in even pieces and not too small. Step number 5, fill the jars. Using a large ladle and funnel, fill each jar one by one with your food contents, leaving the appropriate open headspace. Using a funnel and ladle gives you control and allows you to get a lot in the jar at one time, and the funnel helps to cut down on spills. Remember to use the tool called the headspace ruler bubble remover to remove air pockets by sliding it in between the food and the interior of the jar, moving it up and down a few times. You may want to refer to step 4 in the water bath canning video as a review on how to do this. Next, clean the rims of any debris on the mouth of your jars. with preferably a paper towel or clean cloth dipped in white vinegar and squeezed so as not to allow the vinegar liquid to actually get into your food. You may also just use hot water. After all the lids have been cleaned, place the jar lids and bands onto the jars. Remember not to tighten the bands too tight. Just fingertip tight, enough to secure the lids onto the jar and still allow air to escape from the jar. Step number 6. Load jars into the canner. Place filled jars fitted with the lids and ring bands on the jar rack in the canner using a jar lifter. When moving jars with a jar lifter, make sure the jar lifter is securely positioned below the neck of the jar, below the ring band of the lid. Keep the jar upright at all times. Tilting the jar could cause food to spill into the sealed area of the lid. Step 7. Begin the venting process. This is also known as the exhausting process. First, fasten the canner lid securely. Do not place the regulator or weighted gauge onto the vent pipe. Turn the heat setting to its highest position. Heat until the water boils and steam flows freely in a funnel shape from the open vent pipe or petcock. While maintaining the high heat setting, let the steam flow or exhaust continuously for 10 minutes. As the water begins to boil inside, it creates steam, which will eventually begin to escape from the vent pipe. It starts off slowly, but then eventually develops a strong, steady stream of steam. Once this happens, as I stated, you will set a timer for 10 minutes to allow your canner to properly exhaust before placing the pressure regulator or weighted gauge on. Oops, back up. Here's a small demonstration of that.
Right here is the venting process. Venting.
So that was a small clip of this pressure canner going through the venting process. Strong, steady stream of steam. And then here's another example.
All right, here. Okay, so I'm in the process of venting my pressure canner, which has magnetic beams inside, and we're getting some steam. Okay, I'm not seeing that steady, strong steam flow yet, but it's almost there. And as you can see, this little doohickey has not popped up in the back yet, so we're definitely not ready to start our timer. Okay, not ready, but we're almost there. It's definitely starting to build up. Okay, and there, oh, yeah, there it goes. Okay, so now the steam here is should start to get stronger coming out this vent. Even sounds different. Hear that? See how strong it's starting to get now? Yep, okay, I like the way this looks. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and set my timer for 10 minutes, and then after that is when I'll be placing the regulator on.
All right, and so that was just another demonstration of the venting or exhausting process that must take place before we place our pressure regulator on top of the vent pipe. Step 8, build and maintain pressure. After venting or exhausting the canner, place the pressure regulator or weighted gauge on the vent pipe. Start timing the process according to your approved recipe when the pressure reading on the dial gauge indicates that the recommended pressure has been reached, or for canners without dial gauges, when the weighted gauge begins to jiggle or rock as the manufacturer describes. Regulate the heat under the canner to maintain a steady pressure at or slightly above the correct gauge pressure. Certain types of weighted gauges should jiggle a certain number of times per minute, while other types should rock slowly throughout the process. Check your manufacturer's directions. Here's a demonstration of placing the weighted gauge onto the vent pipe after it has exhausted or vented for 10 minutes.
Alright, so the 10 minutes are up, and it's time to place the regulator onto the vent pipe, okay? Now this is what scares people, but there's nothing to be scared about. Grab this and gently place right on the vent. You won't burn your hand, because the steam is coming up out in one center location. So I'll show you again. So you see that? There's the steam. Got my regulator. And if this makes you nervous, you can put a hot water on your hand if you get comfortable doing it. That's what I used to do. So you're going to just take your and just put it on, come from the angle, come from the side, and just put it on. See? Easy peasy. Good to go. Alright, so there you go.
All right. If you have the 3-piece weighted regulator, like shown in this picture, each weight represents 5 pounds. Each of these little discs here. You will place the amount of pounds on the regulator according to your altitude and the approved recipe. As the weighted pressure is released, it rocks or jiggles. You want this rocking to continue without interruption for the entire processing time. Loss of pressure at any time can result in underprocessing or unsafe food. Quick and large pressure variations during processing may also cause unnecessary liquid losses from your jars. And I'm just going to show you a little example of how this regulator will start to rock once the pressure builds up inside the canner. All right. This is the dial gauge that some canners are designed with instead of monitoring with a pressure regulator. Monitoring the pressure regulator. Let me start over. I apologize. This is the dial gauge that some canners are designed with. Instead of monitoring the pressure regulator, you are monitoring the number on the dial to make sure it maintains at the required PSI for your recipe and altitude. Now, important, regardless of what method your canner uses to monitor pressure, if at any time pressure goes down below the recommended amount, bring the canner back to pressure and begin the timing of the process over from the beginning, using the total original process time. This is important for the safety of the food. So just to be clear what I'm saying here, let's say according to your altitude and the recipe, you're supposed to be processing at a 15 psi. Okay, so there's the 15 psi if you're able to see that with the arrow. Now, let's say everything was fine and it was at the 15 and maybe your recipe calls to process for 20 minutes and 10 minutes have gone by and you notice the pressure is starting to go down. All right, well, you're going to have to get the pressure back up. You're going to have to bring your heat up some and get that pressure back up. And then you're going to get it to maintain for a couple minutes. Then you're going to have to set your timer for 20 minutes all over again. You can't just continue with the 10 minutes that were left. All right, you have to always start over from the beginning whenever you lose pressure. Step number 9, cooling down and depressurizing. When the processing time is completed, turn off the heat, remove the canner from the heat, if possible, and let the canner cool down naturally. Lift the canner to move it. Do not slide the canner. It is also okay to leave the canner in place after you have turned off the burner. It is better to do so than to let jars inside the canner tilt or tip over if the canner is too heavy to move easily. So, as you can see in this photo, this is a huge pressure canner. And it's possible, that there could be quite a few jars in here. Um, and so that could be quite difficult to actually lift up and move to another burner that's cool. So, if you're not able to do it safely and securely, then it would be fine to just leave it on the burner and allow it to cool. While the canner is cooling, it is also depressurizing. Do not force cool the canner. Forced cooling may result in food spoilage. Cooling the canner with, for example, cold running water or opening the vent pipe before the canner is fully depressurized or putting a fan on it are all types of forced cooling. They will also cause loss of liquid from jars and seal failures. Forced cooling may also warp the canning lid. Even after a dial gauge canner has cooled, until the dial reads 0 pounds pressure, be cautious in removing the weight from the vent pipe. Tilt the weight slightly to make sure no steam escapes before pulling it all the way off. New canners will also have a cover lock in the lid or handle that must release after cooling before the lids are twisted off. Do not force the lid open if the cover locks are not released. Manufacturers will provide more detailed instructions for your particular model. New thin-walled canners cool more rapidly and are equipped with vent locks that are designed to open when the pressure is gone. These canners are depressurized when the piston in the vent lock drops to a normal position. Some of these locks are hidden in handles and cannot be seen. However, the lid will not turn open until the lock is released. After the canner is completely depressurized, remove the weight. Wait 10 minutes, then unfasten the lid and remove it carefully. Lift the lid with the underside away from you so that the steam coming out of the canner does not burn your face. So in this left photo, this is the vent lock that pops up once pressure has built up inside of the canner, and it will stay up as long as pressure is built up inside the canner. Once you finish your processing time and you have it cooling on the stove, eventually it will fall down, and that is an indication to you that the pressure in the canner has gone down to safely remove the lid. Step number 10, remove jars and allow for a vacuum seal. Using a jar lifter, remove the jars one at a time, being careful not to tilt the jars. Carefully place them directly onto a towel or cake cooling rack, leaving at least 1 inch of space between the jars during cooling. Avoid placing the jars on a cold surface or in a cold draft. Let the jars sit undisturbed while they cool for 18 to 24 hours. Do not tighten the ring bands on the lids or push down on the center of the flat metal lid until the time has passed and you're actually testing your jars to ensure they sealed properly. After this 18 to 24 hours has passed, remove the ring bands from the sealed jars. Test each jar by pressing into the center with your finger to see if there is any movement, and try to remove the lids with the force of your hand. If you're unable to do so, then the vacuum has been successfully created. The ring bands can now be washed and dried and put away for using another time. Put any unsealed jars in the refrigerator and eat accordingly. Wipe down your jars and lids to remove any residue that may have seeped out onto the jars. Label your jars, date them, and store them in a cool, dry place that is not receiving direct light. Here's a video of myself at the end of a pressure canning process.
Okay, so it is now time to remove the lid from our pressure canner. We've gone through all the steps of pressure canning, and now we are ready to take off the lid and start removing our jars. All right, so now we're still going to be careful because there's still a lot of steam left in this pressure can. But we know that we're safe to open it because the vent lock has gone down. There's no steam coming out the vent. We let time go by after the vent lock went down. We took off the regulator. We let some more time go by, and now we're going to take off the lid. All right, so we're going to twist that counterclockwise, I believe, and make sure you take the lid off away from you. See, there's still quite a bit of steam coming up out of there. All right, and so let's see if I can bring you in a little bit. You see if you're those jars in there. Okay. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and grab our jar lifter. Did you hear that? That's what we want to hear. We want to hear the ping, and you may hear a few more of those. That's a great indicator that we are in the process of sealing our jars. So I heard one. So we're just going to lift those carrots up out of the canner and place them on the countertop. Make sure that there's some type of cloth down so that we're not placing it right on a cool countertop. Look at that. Ooh. See that? See those herbs in there floating around? Some of it must have kind of seeped a little bit because I can kind of smell it. It smells delicious. Just a little bit. And so basically, we're going to place these on the counter and undisturbed for about 18 to 24 hours because they really are literally still processing. Look at the bubbles. You may be able to still see the bubbles. It's literally boiling. So the temperature in this pressure canner gets between 240 to 260 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's the temperature that we need to kill off bacteria in low acid foods like carrots. That's why we have to use the pressure canner when we're going to be canning carrots, because that is a low acid food. All right, that's all of them. I heard another ping. Did you hear that? And you may hear some more. They usually take they're usually pretty quick, but sometimes they take their time. And that's it. So we're going to just leave these on the counter. And then tomorrow we will test the lids, but we're not going to touch them now. We don't want to disturb them. But tomorrow we will test our lids to make sure that they're all sealed. If for some reason one didn't seal here or there, we'll just put it in the refrigerator and just eat it when we're ready. Other than that, I hope that you found some value in this. I hope that you enjoyed.
All right. I hope that that was useful. And I hope that you enjoyed this presentation on pressure canning. This is the last canning presentation I have for you in this course. You made it. Now, again, this course was basic and more of a theory course. And so after having watched all of the class videos, I now encourage you to consider taking a hands-on course and or consultation with myself so that I can walk you step by step through the entire process of either water bath canning and or pressure canning. All right, it's time to get it moving. All right, and so remember, we can do this. Peace, y'all.